As dawn's first light struggled to pierce through the thick, swirling mists that clung to the narrow cobblestone streets of Diamantina, Inácia de Diamantina rose with a quiet resolve that seemed almost woven into her very bones. Her small, humble home, nestled between weathered stone walls and overgrown fig trees, buzzed softly with the sounds of dawn, birds calling in mournful melodies, while the distant clang of miners preparing for the day echoed like a heartbeat of the land itself. She moved with deliberate purpose, her hands trembling slightly as she arranged a cluster of faded candles, their wax already soft from countless nights of vigil. Her fingers brushed over the carved symbols on an ancient fork resting beside her, relic of her ancestors' secret rites, an ordinary utensil transformed into a vessel of sacred power through generations of whispered prayers and silent offerings. Today was Finados Eve, and beneath her calm exterior, a storm of thoughts churned fiercely. She glanced toward the small wooden cross hanging on the wall, her eyes dark with a mixture of reverence and defiance. "Tonight," she whispered, voice barely audible over the awakening world, "I will see justice done." Shadows flickered across her face as she stepped outside, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and burnt wood, her senses heightened to the whispers of spirits and the distant tolling of the church bell, summoning the night's rituals. Her breath curled into the cold morning air as she tightened her shawl, the weight of her secret pressing heavily on her chest. Every step she took was a defiance against the oppressive force of Señor Antonio's tyranny, a man whose cruel eyes and tainted soul had cast a pall of fear and despair over her community for too long. She knew, with unwavering certainty, that tonight she would confront not just her tormentor but the very darkness that had seeped into their land, an act that could ignite a chain of events impossible to undo. Her heartbeat quickened as she approached the clandestine meeting place near the old graveyard, where the boundary between the living and the spirits blurred in the fog. Shadows danced behind her, spirits of her ancestors whispering in her mind, urging her forward. She paused at the iron gate, eyes fixed on the mist-shrouded silhouettes of graves, the moon casting a silver glow that shimmered like spectral threads across the stones. Her hand reached to her side, clutching the fork tightly, feeling the ancient carvings beneath her fingers, a silent promise of retribution and liberation. With a steady breath, she stepped into the darkness, knowing that tonight her act of rebellion would ripple across the very fabric of their existence, igniting a reckoning that could either set her free or bind her forever in the shadows of her ancestors' wrath. Narrative development following. As the villagers gather secretly in a hidden clearing, Inácia leads a quiet prayer around a small altar adorned with ancestral relics, feeling the weight of her community's suffering, and hearing faint whispers of spirits warning her of the dangerous path she is about to take. The story continues exploring the central themes of the original prompt, with unique characters and engaging situations that keep the reader interested in the development of events and conflicts presented in a rich and detailed manner. Under the pallid glow of a waning moon, Señor Antonio, the notorious fighter, staggered into the town square, his boots dragging heavily over the uneven cobblestones as drunken shouts spilled from his cracked lips. His eyes, bloodshot and gleaming with a wild, almost feral intensity, darted around the trembling crowd of laborers and villagers who cowered behind carts and abandoned crates, clutching their meager possessions as if they could somehow shield them from his wrath. "You worthless dogs. If I find one of you slacking again, I'll tan your hide so hard you'll wish you'd never been born," he bellowed, voice thick with alcohol and rage, voice rising to a feverish pitch that echoed off the crooked walls of crumbling cottages, his hand, trembling yet purposeful, clutched a small, intricately carved talisman, an antique relic passed down from dark ancestors, hidden beneath his ragged coat. As he spat drunken threats, the air around him thickened with an unnatural silence, broken only by the muffled sobs of those nearby. Without warning, he staggered toward a makeshift altar in the center of the square, a crude table draped with worn cloth, upon which rested a blackened skull and a scattering of strange symbols scrawled hastily on parchment. His voice softened momentarily, almost to a whisper, as he murmured guttural words that seemed to crawl from the depths of his throat. "The spirits of the land, hear my call. Grant me power to keep these fools in line, to bend the earth and sky to my will." His fingers traced the symbols with trembling reverence, and he flicked a handful of ash into the air, incantations slipping from his lips in a language twisted with ancient, forbidden knowledge. The air crackled with a sinister energy, and shadows around him stretched and writhed like living things, coalescing into spectral shapes that flickered at the edge of perception. Those who dared to watch felt a shiver crawl down their spines, sensing that Antonio's drunken bravado masked a dark alliance, an unholy pact with forces beyond mortal comprehension. As he raised his arms, voice rising into a guttural chant, his eyes flashed with unnatural light, and the ground beneath his feet seemed to pulse with a malevolent heartbeat, confirming that his tyranny was not merely rooted in flesh and bone, but reinforced by sinister supernatural power. In that moment, the line between madness and dark sorcery blurred, revealing a man whose drunken rants concealed a deeper, more dangerous ambition, one that threatened not only the fragile peace of the town, but the very balance between the mortal world and the shadows lurking just beyond sight. Narrative development following. During the ritual, Antonio abuses a young worker, mocking spiritual taboos and threatening to invoke curses, which ignites Inácia's deep-seated rage and her silent vow to end his reign of terror during the upcoming night. The story continues exploring the central themes of the original prompt, with unique characters and engaging situations that keep the reader interested in the development of events and conflicts presented in a rich and detailed manner. Narrative. Development following. As night falls, Inácia, cloaked in shadows, observes Antonio's drunken retreat to the town's graveyard, where he plans to conduct a sinister ceremony, giving her the perfect opportunity to enact her revenge. Guided by ancestral spirits' ominous warnings, the story continues exploring the central themes of the original prompt, with unique characters and engaging situations that keep the reader interested in the development of events and conflicts presented in a rich and detailed manner. Under the ghostly glow of the full moon, Inácia moved silently through the silent cemetery, her footsteps muffled by the damp earth and fallen leaves that crunched softly beneath her. The air was thick with the scent of moss, decay, and whispered secrets carried on the cold breeze. Her heart pounded fiercely in her chest, a tumult of fear and determination swirling within her. In her trembling hands she clutched a small, unassuming cloth, worn and frayed at the edges, its fabric heavy with centuries of sacred ritual. As she knelt beside the oldest grave, her fingers trembling, she reached beneath her shawl and carefully unfolded the cloth, revealing an ordinary-looking fork, tarnished yet strangely luminous in the moonlight. Its surface was smooth, adorned with faint engravings that shimmered faintly, almost alive with ancestral energy. The utensil, passed down through generations of women in her family, was more than mere cutlery. It was a relic infused with their sacred rites, a vessel of their collective strength and spirit. Her breath hitched as she pressed her palm against the cool metal, feeling a faint pulse, as if the fork itself remembered the voices and bloodlines that had forged it. "Tonight," she whispered softly, voice trembling but resolute. This will be the tool that ends his tyranny. Her eyes flicked toward the shadowed trees surrounding the graveyard, where the distant sound of drunken laughter and drunken stumbling footsteps signaled Antonio's approach. Unaware of her silent vigil, she slipped the fork into a fold of sacred cloth, its glow now more perceptible, flickering like a dying ember eager to ignite a flame. The weight of ancestral gaze pressed upon her, ancestral spirits whispering warnings and promises alike, reminding her that her act was no ordinary revenge but a sacred act of spiritual upheaval. "I will confront him," she vowed, lips pressed, into a thin line, not just for my kin but for the land itself. As she rose to her feet, her silhouette merging with the darkness, the fork felt alive in her grasp, an extension of her soul, a relic of justice and defiance. In her mind, she saw the faces of her ancestors, their silent encouragement echoing through the ages. With a steady breath, she turned toward the path Antonio would soon traverse, knowing that tonight, the boundary between the mortal and the spiritual would fracture, and that her silent vow, sealed with that humble yet sacred fork, would change the course of her cursed land forever. In the shadowed hush of the cemetery, moonlight filtering through gnarled branches, Inácia moved with a quiet, deliberate grace, her breath shallow but steady, as she slipped between the ancient tombstones, her heart hammered against her chest, each beat echoing like a war drum. Yet her hands remained firm, clutching the fork, her ancestral relic, whose iron prongs shimmered faintly, flickering like a dying ember, ready to ignite a greater fire. She paused behind a crumbling stone, eyes narrowing as she saw him. Antonio, standing before a dark altar draped in tattered cloth, his broad shoulders bowed in concentration. His voice, low and guttural, chanted incantations in a tone both reverent and sinister, as if summoning spirits from the depths of hell itself. The flickering candlelight cast sinister shadows across his face, highlighting the cold, calculating smirk that curled his lips. He was completely unaware of her presence, lost in his ritual, hands moving over bones, symbols, and a small bundle of herbs. Inácia's grip tightened around the fork, her fingers trembling slightly. Yet her resolve hardened. She knew this was the moment the spirits had warned her about, a crossing that would forever alter her fate. Step by cautious step, she crept, closer, every movement precise, eyes fixed on his back, waiting for the right instant. She could feel the ancestral voices whispering in her mind, urging her to act, to reclaim justice, her muscles coiled with tension, her pulse pounding like thunder, her mind racing through the sacred rites she'd learned, the stories her foremothers had passed down about divine retribution. As Antonio's chanting reached a crescendo, his voice rising in a dark incantation, she took a deep breath, her surroundings dissolving into a surreal tableau of spectral silence. With a swift, almost instinctual motion, she thrust the fork forward, its prongs aiming straight for his eyes, piercing through the darkness and into the very heart of his malevolence. A gasp escaped her lips as the metal clashed against flesh and bone, a visceral scream shattering the night silence. Antonio's eyes widened in shock and fury as the sharp prongs gouged into his face, blinding him with a crimson spray, his body jerking backward in pain. His chants faltered, replaced by a guttural cry of agony and disbelief. Inácia's breath caught as she watched his disfigurement, her mind flooded with a tumult of rage, fear, and an unshakable sense that she had unleashed forces far beyond her understanding. The flickering candlelight flickered wildly, shadows dancing in a frantic scramble, as the ancient spirits seemed to awaken in a chorus of furious whispers. Antonio staggered, clutching at his face, blood streaming between his fingers, the curse of her vengeance now etched into his flesh. For a moment, silence reigned again, thick, suffocating, before the ground beneath them seemed to tremble with the weight of old curses and new retributions. Inácia stood rooted, trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline, knowing that tonight's act was only the beginning of a reckoning that would ripple through the land, forever altering the boundary between the mortal realm and the restless spirits that watched and waited. Narrative development following. With a surge of resolve, Inácia lunges forward, plunging the fork into Antonio's eyes during his ritualistic chant, the visceral act blinding and disfiguring him as the surrounding spirits erupt in a spectral frenzy, demanding balance and retribution. The story continues exploring the central themes of the original prompt, with unique characters and engaging situations that keep the reader interested in the development of events and conflicts presented in a rich and detailed manner. Narrative. Development following. Antonio screams in agony, clutching his face, as supernatural chaos erupts around him. Spectral figures swirl, land trembles, and ancestral spirits wail, signaling that her act has awakened forces that threaten to consume both the living and the dead. The story continues exploring the central themes of the original prompt, with unique characters and engaging situations that keep the reader interested in the development of events and conflicts presented in a rich and detailed manner. Narrative. Development following. Inácia, trembling yet resolute, witnesses her act's immediate aftermath, a haunted landscape of restless spirits demanding justice, while Antonio's curses intensify, transforming him into a conduit for malevolent, supernatural forces. The story continues exploring the central themes of the original prompt, with unique characters and engaging situations that keep the reader interested in the development of events and conflicts presented in a rich and detailed manner. Narrative. Development following. As the night deepens, the town's priest and authorities arrive, alerted by the chaos, confronting Inácia with suspicion and fear, while she experiences visions of her ancestors warning her of the spiritual upheaval she has unleashed. The story continues exploring the central themes of the original prompt, with unique characters and engaging situations that keep the reader interested in the development of events and conflicts presented in a rich and detailed manner. Narrative. Development following. Haunted by guilt and visions, Inácia struggles to protect her family and community from Antonio's curses, witnessing mysterious ailments and deaths among her loved ones, feeling her revenge has brought ruin rather than salvation. The story continues exploring the central themes of the original prompt, with unique characters and engaging situations that keep the reader interested in the development of events and conflicts presented in a rich and detailed manner. Narrative. Development following. Inácia's internal conflict reaches its peak as she faces her fears of losing her morality, contemplating whether her visceral revenge was justified or a betrayal of her spiritual heritage, all while supernatural forces threaten to tear her apart. The story continues exploring the central themes of the original prompt, with unique characters and engaging situations that keep the reader interested in the development of events and conflicts presented in a rich and detailed manner. Under the pallid glow of a waning moon, the graveyard lay shrouded in an almost oppressive silence, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl and the rustling of dry leaves stirred by a gentle, chilly wind. Inácia moved with purpose through the uneven stones, her breath forming ghostly clouds in the crisp air, clutching her ancestral fork. the object that had once been a simple utensil but now thrummed with a deep, sacred energy. Her eyes gleamed with determination, yet shimmered with the weight of her fears. She knew this night would test the very fabric of her soul. Carefully, she approached the trembling earth where her ancestors' spirits lingered, entreating with a whisper, "Guardians of land and spirit, hear me." Her voice, steady yet trembling, resonated like a prayer woven into the night's sacred silence. She kneels, pressing the fork into the freshly disturbed soil, the metal cold and heavy against her palm, as if anchoring her connection to the land's ancient power. Around her, spectral wisps of fog curl like ghostly tendrils, swirling and merging with the shadows cast by crooked headstones. Her heart pounds loudly in her ears as she slices the air with deliberate, precise motions, invoking the spirits with words learned from generations past. "Ancestors, I call upon you. Grant me strength to confront the darkness, to restore balance torn asunder." She raises the fork high, aligning it with the luminous sliver of moonlight that pierces through the mist, its silver gleam reflecting in her wide, resolute eyes. "Tonight I stand between worlds, land, spirit, and vengeance, prepared to pay whatever price is required." Her voice cracks momentarily as she begins her ritual, whispering incantations that echo softly, almost like a chant carried by the wind. Shadows flicker and dance, coalescing into the haunting visage of her forebears, their faces etched with wisdom, sorrow, and silent warning. As her words deepen, she presses the fork into the earth once more, channeling ancestral energy through the metal, feeling it hum with a life of its own. A cold gust sweeps through the graveyard, stirring the spirits into a frenzied dance, and her voice rises in a final, desperate plea. "Come forth, spirits of land and blood, confront the darkness that taints my soul and threatens my people. Let this act forge the path to salvation or damnation, for I am the vessel of your justice." The air thickens with restless energy, and in that moment, her resolve is tested, her mind teetering on the brink of the unknown, while her heart beats fiercely, poised to face the vengeful shadowed spirit of Antonio that lurks beyond the veil, ready to answer her call or consume her in its wrath. Narrative development following. During the climax, Inácia faces Antonio's spectral form in a poetic duel, an amalgamation of darkness and remorse, using land, spirits, and her own sacrifice to forge a sacred pact that demands surrender and understanding. The story continues exploring the central themes of the original prompt, with unique characters and engaging situations that keep the reader interested in the development of events and conflicts presented in a rich and detailed manner. Narrative. Development following. As the spirits are appeased and Antonio's curse lifts, Inácia begins transforming into a guardian spirit, her corporeal form fading as she becomes a mythic protector who watches over the land, embodying justice, vengeance, and spiritual renewal. The story continues exploring the central themes of the original prompt, with unique characters and engaging situations that keep the reader interested in the development of events and conflicts presented in a rich and detailed manner. Narrative. Development following. The town, now freed from Antonio's tyranny, initiates a new tradition honoring Inácia's sacrifice, recognizing her act not as mere revenge but as a necessary act of spiritual justice that restored harmony between the living and the dead. The story continues exploring the central themes of the original prompt, with unique characters and engaging situations that keep the reader interested in the development of events and conflicts presented in a rich and detailed manner. As dawn's first light spilled over the ancient hills surrounding Diamantina, a fragile hush settled upon the land, as if the very earth had paused to honor what had transpired beneath the shroud of night. In the quiet breath of early morning, a faint, shimmering figure hovered at the edge of the awakening town, a translucent silhouette that flickered like a candle's flame caught in a gentle breeze. It was Inácia's spirit, now woven into the very fabric of the land she had fought so fiercely to protect. Her form was faint, yet radiant, a shimmering outline cloaked in the pale glow of dawn. Her eyes hollow, yet filled with a profound serenity that belied the tumult of her sacrifice. Silent and watchful, she observed the waking world, her essence intertwined with the whispering winds, the rustling leaves, and the distant toll of bells that echoed through the cobblestone streets. Villagers, unaware of her presence, moved about, their morning routines, their faces etched with gratitude and reverence, each one carrying the memory of her act of vengeance, now transformed into a sacred legend. A young girl clutching a hand-woven cloth paused at the marketplace and looked up at the sky, whispering, "Thank you, Spirit of Diamantina, for saving us." Her voice carried softly on the breeze, as if Inácia herself acknowledged the heartfelt prayer. The land beneath her spectral feet hummed with quiet energy, resonating with ancestral voices lost to time but never forgotten. Inácia's essence was no longer bound to flesh or pain. She had become the guardian spirit of justice, a silent sentinel who observed the world she had forever altered. Her gaze lingered on the horizon, a symbol of hope and the unbreakable bond between the living and the dead. "Your sacrifice was not in vain," she seemed to say, her voice a whisper carried on the wind, a promise to those she loved and to the land she had sworn to protect. As the sun climbed higher, illuminating the lush valleys and rugged mountains, her form faded into the morning mist, becoming one with the sacred landscape, an eternal guardian whose story was woven into the folklore of Diamantina itself, a testament to the power of righteous vengeance, ancestral justice, and spiritual awakening that would echo through generations yet to come.